Welcome back. So in chapter 12, the team is on their way to Lake Tele. They're going to drop off Grace and Marty at the school on their way. They're taking with them PD, the little dog, the raven, and the monkey. And Marty and Grace accidentally let the monkey out of its cage and follow it down this hatch. And then we find out that something's going wrong with the helicopter and the floor beneath them disappears. So now we are going to read the next chapter. We're going to do 2 chapters today. The next chapter is Free Fall. Falling 18,000 feet was not on Grace's list, but she fainted anyway. It wasn't on Marty's fear list either, but he would have to put it on the list if he'd had one. As they dropped from the belly of the jet, he managed to hook one arm through the mesh and grab his limp sister with the other. Out of the corner of his wind-blurred vision, he saw something small and dark falling next to him. Petey's ears were standing straight up, and her little brown eyes were bulging out of her skull. The only way he could snag her was to free one of his hands. He looked up. The canister was dropping perpendicular like a bomb, and Bo was perched on the very top, baring her teeth in a frozen fear grimace. The mesh extended beyond the end of the canister, where Bo was sitting, forming a shallow basket. If he could get Grace up there, she would be relatively safe for the time being. He managed to get her over his shoulder and climbed to the top. Once there, he found several straps securing the canister. He quickly loosened one of them and cinched it around her waist. He wasn't worried about Bo. She was holding the mesh so tightly it would take a jackhammer to loosen her fingers and toes. PD was another story. The little poodle was still hurtling towards Earth, an activity Marty was no stranger to. The summer before, his father had secretly taken him skydiving. "If you tell your mother about this, she will kill me," he had said. Marty told no one about their secret outing, including Luther and Grace. He had done well on the course he had taken prior to his jumps. He looked at the rapidly approaching ground, estimating they had fallen about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. In a few seconds, a parachute would deploy. At least he hoped it would deploy. He scrambled back down the side of the canister PD had drifted out of, easy reach. He hooked his feet around the mesh and leaned back with both arms outstretched. And to his delight, the canister inched toward the falling canine. It took him 3 tries, but he finally managed to grab PD's leg and pull her in. He stuffed her into his cargo pocket. As he was climbing back up, he heard a loud pop. He braced himself. The parachute snapped open, jarring every bone in his body. He stared at the bright yellow canopy billowing above Grace and Bo, thinking it was about the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, but he didn't have time to appreciate his good luck. Beneath them was a lush carpet of green trees that Marty knew would not feel like a carpet when they crashed through them. "Pick your landing spot with the utmost care," his instructor had said. "The ground is the only part of the fall that can kill you." There were several small lakes to the right. Marty didn't want to land in the water, but he figured it would be better than breaking through tree limbs. He leaned out from the canister, and the parachute began to drift towards the largest of the lakes. Now all he had to do was wake Grace so she wouldn't drown when the canister hit the water and sank. He started back up to the top to do just that when a terrifying word popped into his mind. That word was crocodiles. A few months earlier, he and Luther had watched a documentary on the 14-foot long carnivorous reptiles with 160 sharp teeth. They store their victims underwater until the meat is soft enough for them to tear off and gulp down in chunks. The gnarly television host had commented, "Tenderize them in the sun till they're like butter, and the Congo is crawling with big crocs." At the time, Marty would have given just about anything to see a living, breathing crocodile. Not anymore. The lake below looked like a pot of soup stock awaiting its main ingredients. 2 humans with a dash of chimp and a pinch of poodle dropped in for flavor. Marty undid Grace's strap and shook her. "Wake up." She didn't move. Grace could swim like a fish. Without her, he wouldn't be able to help Bo and PD to shore. And if there were hungry crocodiles in the lake, "You gotta wake up," he slapped her. Her eyelids didn't even flicker. They were within seconds of splashing down. He grabbed her by the arm and was on the verge of jumping off when a gust of hot, humid air came out of nowhere, catching the chute and pushing the canister across the surface like a jet ski. "All the way to shore," Marty shouted, punching the air with both fists in encouragement. "Go, baby, go." He probably should have been holding on because 20 feet from shore the canister slammed into its submerged log. Marty was catapulted into the air and did 2 complete somersaults before doing a belly flop in the waist-deep, brackish water. He got to his feet, coughing and spitting, and scooping the mud out of his eyes, just in time to see the parachute drag the canister ashore. He was relieved to see Grace still attached. The canister lingered for a moment just above the ground, giving Bo a chance to jump off and disappear into the trees. "Wake up, Grace," Marty sputtered, watching in horror as a gust of wind started lifting the canister straight up into the air. "No," he struggled forward, hindered by the oozing sucking at his sneakers. "Wake up! Jump!" Grace did not wake up, but a very large crocodile did. It slithered into the water 50 yards to his right. As he stared in dismay at the flesh-gulping reptile, he felt something nibbling on his thigh and nearly fainted himself until he remembered that crocodiles don't nibble. "PD!" He reached into his cargo pocket and pulled the gasping poodle out. "Geez, I'm really sorry. He looked back at the crocodile, which had alarmingly cut the distance between them and its resting place in half. "We're out of here." They reached shore just ahead of the crocodile, but well behind the canister. It had disappeared above the tree canopy and headed east. Marty ran several dozen yards, stopped to catch his breath, and then threw up. Wow, so it sounds like they landed in the jungle of the Congo. Chapter 14, The Parrot. Grace thought she was having a dream. She was lying on soggy ground beneath the branches of an incredibly tall tree. Perched on the lowest branch, looking down at her with great curiosity, was a gray parrot with a red tail. She stood and brushed the dead leaves and mud off her uniform skirt. "Of all my dreams," she thought, "this is by far the most vivid." The air was thick and hot and smelled like rotting fruits and vegetables. Long, eerie fingers of fog drifted just above the ground, as if hunting for something. Insects swarmed, and the trees were alive with the songs and calls of concealed animals. Despite all this, Grace was not overly concerned. After all, it was just another dream. Or was it? Perhaps she was having some kind of premonition. It wouldn't be the first time she'd had one. Maybe her parents were calling to her from the Amazon. It certainly looked like the Amazon. And she had found a window or portal to find them. She tried to remember what had happened just before she woke under the tree. Yes, she remembered. Marty and I were searching for Bo down a hatch in Wolf's cargo hold. Bo snatched the bananas from me. I must have bumped my head because the back of it is a little sore, and so is my left arm. Marty will shake me awake in a moment, but I'll hope he waits until I have a chance to look around a while. The parrot fluttered to the ground and started picking through the leaves, then lunged for her shoelace with its black beak and began tugging on it. "That worm is attached to my foot, little bird," Grace said. The parrot stopped the hopeless tug-of-war, fixed its beady eyes on her, and let out a piercing shriek. Grace covered her ears. "That is very annoying." The parrot yanked on her shoelace again, and Grace took a step forward to stop it from tearing the lace off. The parrot continued pulling until Grace had taken several steps from where she had fallen. "All right, I give up," Grace said. "I'll follow you, but I hope you're leading me to my parents." Wolf relinquished the pilot's seat to the rested Phyllis Bishop. "We've made pretty good time." Okay, wow, so they don't even know that Marty and Grace have fallen out of the cargo hold. "The tailwind helped," Phyllis said. "Unfortunately, Dad and I will be fighting a headwind all the way up to Switzerland." She started the procedure for their initial descent into the Congo. "I'll go back and make sure Grace and Marty are buckled in." Wolf turned to leave the cockpit and nearly bumped into a panicked Laurel Lee. "They're gone," she shouted. "Who's gone?" "Marty and Grace." "Impossible," Wolf said. "They must be hiding." Laurel shook her head. "I don't think so. Bo and PD are gone too." Marty staggered, tripped, and fell through the thick green tangle in an easterly direction, hoping to find his sister in one piece and to put as much distance between himself and the crocodile as he possibly could. After fighting his way for a quarter of a mile, the word "stop" floated in the surface of his addled brain. He sat down to catch his breath. Petey jumped out of his pocket and started sniffing around. "Watch out for snakes," he warned her. "Real snakes." Petey ignored him. Fine. He turned his attention back to STOP, which was an acronym for Stop, Think, Observe, Plan, a concept taught to him in every survival course he had ever taken. Stop. He was already stopped except for his flailing arms swatting at the insects trying to eat him alive. Think. I have just fallen out of a jet at 18,000 feet, and I think I'm lucky to be alive. Observe. I'm in the middle of a treacherous jungle filled with vicious insects, hungry crocodiles, and a teacup poodle. He felt his head, and I've lost my favorite baseball cap. Plan. I've got to find Grace. If she wakes up suddenly, she'll probably fall off the canister. If that doesn't kill her, something in the jungle will. He started trudging forward again and was nearly beheaded when the chain around his neck caught on a branch. The gizmo! It was buttoned to his shirt pocket. He turned it on and touched Grace's name with the stylus. The blue square was moving. She was either riding the canister, walking, or a large carnivore was dragging her to its dank, smelly lair. He touched the Show All button. A world map appeared, peppered with dozens of colored squares, most of which Marty didn't recognize. Wolf seemed to have people, or at least tracking tags, all over the world, and he was happy to see that a number of them were flashing in Brazil, presumably people searching for his parents. Below the map was a zoom button. He touched it. Please select geographic location. He chose the Congo, then zoomed in on his gray square. In his immediate vicinity were Grace's blue square, Bo's purple square, PD's pink square, and a stationary yellow square, the same shade as the parachute, which he guessed was the canister. Grace was now moving away from him and the canister. He zoomed in a bit closer and a detailed map appeared. He estimated that he was no more than 2 miles away from her, but in between them were swamps, streams, acres of quicksand, no doubt, and nothing that remotely resembled a road or trail. He wished he had a machete, or better yet, a chainsaw. He also wished his sister would stay put until he reached her. Where was she going? Grace didn't know where she was going, but the parrot was obviously leading her someplace. It had given up on her shoelace and was flying from branch to branch, waiting for her to catch up, screeching loudly when she dawdled. She had stepped over 2 very large snakes, fear number 12, without the slightest trepidation. She had walked under a flock of roosting bats, as big as house cats, fear number 43, and actually paused to observe them for a moment without any anxiety. The humid air filled her with a comfortable warmth. Moving along the soft, mist-covered ground was like walking on clouds. She wondered if this was how Marty felt all the time. 2 hours later, Marty drew to within shouting distance of his wandering sister. As he stopped to check the map on the gizmo, it beeped, and the map was replaced by his uncle's anxious face. "Marty!" "I didn't do it," Marty said. Wolf was to overcome with emotion to respond to Marty's denial. He broke down sobbing, and he was not the only one. They were off-screen, but it sounded like Laurel, Phyllis, and even tough old Phil were shedding a few tears. It went on for over a minute. Then Wolf wiped his eyes and got down to business. "What's happened? How did you and Grace get separated? Is she all right?" Marty quickly related the story of their fall, omitting Grace's fainting, the crocodile, and his puking. No need to upset his uncle more than he already was. "You'll have to find her before dark," Wolf said. Du jour, Marty thought. "No problem. How soon will you be here to pick us up?" Wolf frowned. "I'm afraid it's not as simple as that." "What do you mean?" Wolf explained. The gray parrot led Grace down a narrow, winding path, carved through thick green foliage. The tangled branches blotted out the sun, grabbed her blouse, and snagged her shirt. Despite her belief that she was still having a dream or premonition of some sort, doubt began to take hold of her. She stopped. "Is it really leading me to my parents?" The parrot let out an angry shriek and hopped farther down the animal trail, disappearing into the darkness ahead. "I'm not going with you," she called after it. "I'm tired of this dream." "Yeah, well, you'd better get used to it." Grace turned and was astounded to see Marty standing behind her, looking rumpled and exhausted. "How did you get here?" "I fell out of the jet with you and Bo," and pulled an exhausted poodle out of his pocket. Grace's mouth dropped open. "Did you just say we fell out of the jet?" Marty nodded. "Where are we?" "The Congo?" Marty answered and stepped forward, fully expecting Grace to faint again, but she didn't. This was not his only surprise. Aside from a few little tears in her uniform blouse, his sister looked remarkably well. She was barely sweating, and she didn't appear to have a single insect bite on her. Marty was covered in scrapes and itchy welts, and the insects were still trying to devour him one nip at a time. "So it's not a dream?" Grace whispered. "I wish it was." Marty adjusted the straps of his father's backpack, which were digging into his shoulders. Grace was disappointed that she was not on the track of her parents, but she was also elated that she had just taken a walk through the jungle virtually with no apprehension. In fact, she was still feeling relatively calm, in spite of Marty's news of how they had gotten here. She was beginning to wonder if her walk had really happened. "You're taking this a lot better than I thought you would," Marty said. "I guess I am. The last thing I remember is you and me going down the hatch to retrieve Bo." Marty thought back to the fall and gave an involuntary shiver despite the heat. "It's just as well," he said, then went on to explain what had happened, emphasizing how he had saved her and PD, and ending with the croc trying to eat him and the poodle for lunch. "Thanks for saving me," she said. "Just another day in the life of a knight in tarnished armor." Grace actually smiled at his joke, which made Marty a little nervous. There was something different about her, and it wasn't just the absence of insect bites. Oh my gosh, is Grace dead? That would be really weird, but like, why are none of the insects biting her? Where's Bo? She asked. I haven't seen her since she jumped. Wolf says there's a spare dog whistle in the canister. We're supposed to call her and put on the video harness. You've talked to Wolf? Marty held up the gizmo, face to face, more or less. What did he say? He wasn't mad, if that's what you mean. That's not what I mean. When's he going to pick us up? We'd better get moving. He turned around and started back down the path. Marty? A week, he said casually. No big deal. Grace ran to catch up with him. Like in 7 days? They can only take the Humvee as far as the Ubangi River, Marty answered. After that, they'll have to walk to Lake Tele. He's pretty sure they'll get here faster than a week, but he wants us to prepare for the worst. Can't they send someone in to pick us up sooner? Grace asked. A rescue team? Marty sighed. I asked Wolf about that, and there's a little problem. He and Laurel are still here illegally. We are too. He didn't have time to get a visa or a permit to go to Lake Tele. That would have been taken weeks, and he doesn't think he would have gotten one anyway. If the government finds us here, we'll be arrested and put in jail. I guess they're having some kind of revolution. Revolution? Don't worry, it won't affect us here. Grace was still having difficulty sorting out what was real and what wasn't. When you found me, did you see a parrot? Marty shook his head. It's about the size of a crow, but light gray with a red tail. I didn't see it. Why? I must be losing my mind, she thought. It's not important. What are we supposed to do for a week? How are we going to live out here? The canister's full of supplies. Marty slapped a rather large insect that landed on his arm. And bug juice. Tomorrow morning we're going for a little hike through the jungle. Wolf wants us to go to a place called the Sky House. Grace looked around in bewilderment. And where's that? Marty shrugged. Somewhere in the goblin universe. All right, that's it for chapter 14. See you guys next time.